Hello and welcome to Chequered Flag Extra. The Chequered Flag podcast is now weekly, so on top of our usual podcasts, previewing and reviewing the latest race, you'll also hear from us in non-race weeks, reacting to the very latest news. Plus, you'll hear exclusive content such as extended interviews with drivers and team principals, past and present. So make sure you're subscribed to BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone settings so you never miss a new episode. This week, we'll be hearing from Sauber team principal Jonathan Wheatley, who discusses his new role and Sauber's upcoming transition to Audi in 2026. My name's Harry Benjamin. As has been the case for the last few podcasts, I find myself in the company of the man who's always on the hunt for the latest scoop. It's, of course, the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. How have you been, Benny, in the, 24 hours, give or take, since I last saw you on the flight back from Miami?
Feels like quite a brutal trip, Harry. That was probably the most uncomfortable aeroplane I think I've ever been on. You were sitting across the aisle, so I'm sure you feel the same.
I tried to swap with Gunther Steiner. He was seat 1D and I was 31J, and I don't think he saw that as quite a fair swap. So
what he said was he'd swap seats if you could swap ages, wasn't it?
If I could, I would. I would have done it. It would have been worth it. Well, look, before we hear from Talk of Team Principals, Jonathan Wheatley, the big news in Formula One right now surrounds Alpine and Jack Doohan. After months of speculation, the Australian rookie has been demoted after 6 Grand Prix to reserve driver for at least 5 races and effectively swaps with Argentina's Franco Colapinto. Andrew, what more can you tell us on this?
Well, that about sums it up, Harry. I think we've been expecting this for quite a long time within Formula One, ever since Alpine signed Colapinto from Williams over the winter. Obviously, there was no reason for them to do that unless they were planning to put him in, because they already had a reserve driver in Paul Aron, the Estonian former Formula 2 driver. And it's well known that Colapinto comes, at least in theory until now, with a bag full of sponsorship money from Latin America, because his few races with Williams last year generated a huge amount of interest in that part of the world that hadn't been there until that point. So it's a very simple thing to explain. Basically, Colapinto brings more money than Doohan. So Briatore's put Flavio Briatore, the executive advisor of Alpine, put in place by Renault Group CEO Luca De Meo last summer. He's taken a financial decision, put Colapinto in, and I think although they've said for the moment it's only 5 races, unless he's abject, I expect him to carry on for the rest of the season for that reason. Doohan's done a decent job in the first 6 races, and a lot of people will think this is a harsh decision because, it comes after the first weekend on which he actually out-qualified his teammate Pierre Gasly for the Grand Prix. But Formula One's a tough old world, and he's got to have to suck this up, obviously, and hope for the best.
In the build-up to this, we had team principal Oliver Oakes resigning. Initially, there was the presumption that this was a result of the driver change. However, Flavio Briatore and Alpine have released a statement saying a lot has been said in the past 24 hours, incorrectly associating the decision of Ollie resigning to an alleged disagreement or that we shared different views. This is completely false and far from the truth. Me and Ollie have a very good relationship and had long-term ambitions to drive this team forward together. We respect Ollie's request to resign and have therefore accepted his resignation. The reasons are not related to the team and are of a personal nature. So what does this mean going forward, Andrew? Does Flavio effectively become the team principal now?
Yes, which is interesting, isn't it? Because, you've got to... Running a team on a day-to-day basis involves lots of things that an executive advisor doesn't have to do, on a sort of practical, regular meetings type of existence. And of course, he's a very different team principal than some of the team principals that have become emerged in recent years. The likes of Andrea Stella, James Vowles at McLaren and Williams. They're very much engineering team principals. That's actually a phrase that Zach Brown at McLaren uses about Andrea Stella. Briatore is obviously more of the commercial type of team principal, like Toto Wolff or Brown himself. Not that Brown is the team principal. So we'll just have to wait and see how that develops. Of course, everyone will be thinking this is just the latest example of turmoil at a team that's specialised in turmoil for the last 5 years. They've set... Renault came back to Formula 1 in 2016, Harry, if you remember, setting themselves a 5-year plan to become world champions. Then obviously Laura Rossi was appointed as head of the team when it was rebranded Alpine. He set another 5-year plan.
Wasn't there a 100 race plan in there somewhere as well?
Well, that was the 5-year plan, because 100 races is about 5 years, isn't it? Now Rossi's gone. Otmar Zafnauer, who was the team principal under Rossi, gone. Alan Permain, who was long-time sporting director at Renault, been there for 30-odd years, gone. Bruno Famin replaced Zafnauer, gone. Oakes replaced Famin, gone. So
what is that, 7 team principals since 2020 or something like that? I mean, that spells turmoil, doesn't it?
Yeah, and look, they're not in a great place, are they? They were sort of specialising in finishing 4th, 5th most of the time when they were Renault. They carried on in that sort of vein for a while. Then they made that catastrophic driver market mismanagement scenario with Fernando Alonso and Oscar Piastri in 2022 and lost both of them. How stupid does that look now? It looked pretty stupid at the time, but it looks even worse in hindsight. And things have just gone from bad to worse. They scraped back up, to be fair, when Briatore came in last summer. After that, they made significant progress. They were really scrabbling around at the back at the beginning of last season. Got up to 6th in the Constructors' Championship by the end of last year, but they're 9th after 6 races this year, 7 points. Doohan hadn't scored a single point. And obviously a lot of other controversies, like ditching the Renault engine programme at the end of this year and becoming a Mercedes customer team. The Briatore's got a lot of work on his hands for a 75-year-old who doesn't specialise in engineering.
Well, let's see how it all unfolds. Franco Colapinto then returns to the Formula One grid. His first race will be in Imola alongside Pierre Gasly, and you can hear our usual Checkered Flag podcasts around that weekend from Thursday the 15th of May. Plus, we'll have live coverage of every session, including the race across the 5 Live network. But before that, and again, speaking of team principals, let's hear from one of the newest on the block. Jenny Gow has been sitting down with the Sauber team principal, Jonathan Wheatley, a man who's been around in the paddock a long time, but talks to us about his new role since departing from Red Bull.
5 Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
My name's Jonathan Wheatley and I'm the team principal at Sauber.
Are you getting used to saying that now?
I can do it in my sleep now.
It's not been that long though, has it?
No, I think I'm about in my first month now. And of course, on the back of a triple header. So at one point, I think I spent more time at airports and in the air than I'd had with the team. But it's been an adventure.
How are you settling in?
Yeah, very well. I mean, everyone's really friendly. I mean, genuinely, there's a passion and a excitement in the team. And it's a bit infectious, to be honest.
It's a big move, isn't it? Just the logistical move. Let's talk about that first, because moving your base from the UK across to Switzerland, I mean, you documented it well.
Yes. So Lola, my pug, and I made our way over through some quite interesting conditions at one point, and with dealing with a classic car as well. So, I mean, typical me, I think I jumped in with both feet first and then just sorted it out as I went along the way. But no, I mean, it was great to drive over to Switzerland. I mean, it's just the most incredibly beautiful country. And as I came into the town that we're now living with, the sun was coming up, and it was just absolutely beautiful.
So tell me, what made you want to become team principal at Sauber, but at all?
I think life's about opportunities that you get offered. I mean, I have said before that I'm largely unambitious. What I actually enjoy doing is working with a team, doing what I can to support that team, and that energy of working with an organisation that's trying its very best all the time. And trying to perform better than the individual. And I guess then this opportunity came up. I mean, Audi, what a brand, what an opportunity. And, I had opportunities to do other things in the UK. I didn't have to move to Switzerland to further my career, but there's not a single offer that I had or an opportunity that was anywhere near as exciting as this. Because
you must have had other opportunities along the way. People know you so well. You've been in the paddock for, is it fair to say, a long time?
Yeah, so I think this is my 34th year. And yeah, the phone rings from time to time and you go and have a meal in a pub and chat to somebody every now and then. But nothing over that 19-year period that I was at Red Bull had any kind of appeal, even close to this one.
What came first? The decision to leave or the invitation to join Audi Sauber?
That's interesting. Nobody's asked me that before. I don't think it was a decision to leave. It was an opportunity that presented itself. If I look back on it, I don't want to spend too much time on how I ended up with that opportunity in front of me. But the moment it presented itself, it was compelling, and it was like an earworm. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And, I keep talking about as a kid, the impact of Audi and their involvement in motorsport and how exciting I found it, the rallying, watching all of these legends smashing around in quattros in the forest, and I'm a car guy, so I love all that. And then the IMSA cars, just incredible, the history of Audi. And so, I was hooked.
So how are you going to make this work? How are you going to be the leading light above this team and further this team's ambition?
Well, the wonderful thing is that I was incredibly excited about the opportunity to work with Mattia, because I've known him for a long time.
That's Mattia Binotto, obviously.
Mattia Binotto, yeah. And so Mattia and I have split responsibilities, but joint responsibility for the running of the team. Now, Mattia's role, and I can't think of a better person for it, it's a very difficult one, is to bring together the chassis and the powertrain and create the Formula One car that we're going to win races with and championships with. And if you imagine when that Formula One car leaves the factory, it becomes my responsibility. And this was interesting to me because at the moment we sit here, it's a 24 race season. And I think this split responsibility, somebody's in the factory, somebody's at the circuit. I think it's really, really difficult to do both nowadays. And it was another part that really excited me about this role.
Can't believe you've signed up for another 24 races every season for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's a big undertaking. It's a commitment for a person. If you think about family, friends, the sacrifices, Jonathan, that you've made along the way to be here, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, how do I do it? How am I still get excited about every single race. I guess at some point I won't do, but my family have been incredibly supportive. Emma and I have been married for 30 years. She's raised our 3 boys while I've been away. And I think there's probably only been one conversation about me stopping traveling in that whole period. And I think there's an untold story here of the people that support the people that do all of these races, and the families that are back at home watching every session, wishing you luck, your friends and family. I mean, without that, I don't think you could do it.
So you've now officially joined the Piranha Club. What's that like?
Well, so far, I know all the team principals anyway. I've been in the paddock a long time, as you say, and I even worked with Stefano Domenicali back in the sporting groups back in when I first started at Red Bull. So I know everyone really well. No doubt they'll show their teeth at some point, but at the moment, everyone's being incredibly friendly and welcoming. Has
that shift in your job shifted anyone's perception of you or the way they speak to you or treat you?
I mean, no, not at the moment. I think, you've known me a long time, Jenny.
It's changed our relationship entirely. I can't speak. I'm in a room with 2 people and you're actually on a microphone. This doesn't happen.
Yeah, you're right. I haven't done much media over the last few years, but no, not at all. I think I'm the same person I always have been. I look in the mirror in the morning, I'm the same person I always have been, and I try to act that way with everyone that I come across.
So what's your first mission What's the first thing on the to-do list that you really want to nail?
I think I want to start to change the culture in the company. I've walked in, Mattia's already started that process. I'm very engaged in that process. And when I talk about changing the culture, I don't want that to seem like a negative thing. It's a positive thing. We've got to change our mindset as an organisation if we're going to compete with these top teams in Formula One. We can't continue to be a small team. We have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is a phrase I'm using an awful lot at the moment, and trying to help managers, try to help the business through that. And to show them what a big team thinks like, and also to believe we can win and believe in ourselves. So I think the biggest initial step is the culture change, but then there's structures and procedures and all the, if you like, the boring stuff that has to be right. People have to understand what their responsibilities are, where their role begins and ends. If you imagine if you've been running a department on a shoestring budget for 30 years or something, the idea that you've got a cash investment, you can expand your team, bring in new talent, but you've got to support people through that process, support managers through that process. But you know what? Honestly, everyone's ready for it. And there's an energy, I keep talking about this, there's an energy at Sauber at the moment as we're on this transition into the Audi F1 project.
Because I'm assuming that going from a large team like Red Bull, a winning team, consecutively championship wins, race wins, to a team like Sauber, where the comparison is so different. You're not looking at race wins unless you get a very, unusual race. So how do you manage those expectations of going from winning to knowing that it's unlikely that you'll win at the moment?
It's interesting, isn't it? I have to ask myself why I left Renault at the height of their powers to go to Red Bull and do more or less exactly the same journey that you're just talking about now. I think every point in somebody's career, you face this transition. What do you do? Do you carry on doing what you're doing? I mean, I've had an amazing 19 years at my former team and loved nearly every second of it, But there's comes a time when you have to challenge yourself again, when you have to get out of your comfort zone, move country, and just crack on with a new project, and a project that's exciting. And that's, I think, where I find myself right now. And
what about your drivers right now?
I think we've got a really strong driver lineup. We've got the driver lineup we need. In Nico, we've got tremendously experienced driver, proven ability. I still don't understand why he hasn't had a podium. Maybe we could do something about that over the next few years.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that everyone wants to do. Just tick that box for Nico.
Yeah, and he brings with him an expertise and a calm, which I think is a fantastic environment for Gabriel to learn in. And Gabriel's a fantastic talent. I mean, you don't win F3 and F2 in your first season, He's got an amazing work ethic. He believes in the team. And again, this positive energy just exudes from everywhere. And I'm really, really pleased with our driver pairing.
And how do you go about managing the two of them going forward? What will be the thing that you want them to achieve this year, going forward into the Audi era?
We're very different things with both drivers. With Nico, he knows what to do. He's been racing a long time. I'm there to provide some guidance, some help and support. And with Gabriel, he's a young driver. And I've learned a lot of lessons working with young drivers over the years. Made some mistakes along the way, and I think I'm actually better prepared and in a really good position to help support Gabriel through the season and through his next few years in Formula One than I would have been 5 years ago.
Talk to me about the beginning of your F1 journey, because it's a while ago, but what got you into this paddock in the first place? And I want to know your best anecdote. We'll get to that in the end, but talk to me about why F1.
I had a love of motorsport from when I was a small child. I built model cars, model aircraft. I took things apart, put them back together again. I was racing karts from when I was 9 years old, and nobody else was going to clean the car or take the engine off and sort all the bits and pieces out, do the bolts up, all that kind of stuff. So I learned on the job, if you like. I then went my father was racing cars, and of course this was a massive influence in my life. I spent every weekend with my father at a circuit somewhere or other with his GT40s or his Lola T70s or Can-Am cars and what have you. With my little brother, I think we were both doing tyre pressures when we were sort of 8 and 9 years old. So I guess motorsport had always been a massive thing. I started at the company that looked after Dad's racing cars. I started after work just cleaning up, emptying the bins when I was about 13 years old, a Ferrari restoration specialist. They took me on as an apprentice, and I learned the tools of the trade, at the same time as karting all the time. Then I was working with my best friend David Cuff and working on his karts. And I met most of my friends there, Dario Franchitti, David Coulthard, all the guys that were racing with Marino, Franchitti. I met them all at that age. And I guess Formula One looked like an unattainable dream for me. I thought I was a good mechanic, but you don't know what you're capable of until you put yourself up against the best. And one way or another, I was very, very fortunate. A good friend of mine who I used to work with, Kenny Hankamer, bumped into him in a petrol station. He offered me, I said, got any jobs going? He said, I think I have. Had a phone call with Nigel Stepney, and then before I knew it, I was on the front end of Roberto Moreno's Benetton at the French Grand Prix in 1991.
I mean, that's the pinch yourself moment, isn't it?
Yeah, and, I guess cometh the hour, cometh the man. I didn't know what I was capable of. And I think I acquitted myself okay in the end. I think they tried to put me on rear jack. And the trouble was, I wasn't really heavy enough. So the car came in with a full tank of fuel and my feet were in the air, but the jack didn't go anywhere.
Good times, very different times. And you've seen all sorts of different times throughout your career in F1. What have been some of your favourites?
Yeah, I think I like change. I think I'm quite a big fan of change. So, I quite like it when a driver pairing changes, when you work with a new driver. I like that as a mechanic. I mean, remotivating yourself all the time and reinvigorate. I mean, it's a long time I've been in the paddock, but I think you can hear I'm as excited as I've ever been about a season. I think, I don't know, every single thing is special about this sport. I feel privileged to have worked in it as long as I have done, and I try to make the most out of every day.
There have been some dark days as well, haven't there, during that time?
I mean, I guess you're talking about Imola in 1994. It's funny, Ayrton was my hero, probably still is my hero. When we were karting as kids, he was the first guy to make it into Formula One, so he felt like one of us was making it into Formula One. So I followed him through karting. I watched him race in karting. Then I watched him race in Formula Ford and Formula 3, that incredible Formula 3 season with Martin Brundle. It was a lot of those races. Dad was racing the support series and what have you. And then he made it to Formula One. And then, there's a lot written about that 94 season, but there was a camaraderie in the pit lane as well, and certainly Ayrton, I had a connection with him. Maybe I was a bit cheeky, but Michael would set a pole position and then I would put his lap time on his pit board, and then when Ayrton drove out of the garage I'd show him the lap time. So so he'd look at me, and then if we ended up on pole he'd shake his fist and what have you, and it was great. But then that Imola weekend, I still the film that Manish Pandey hit Senna, I still can't watch it through to the end. It's funny even now, but that weekend was just something about it. There was like a dark cloud hanging over Formula One, and Rubens had that crash with his hands in front of his visor, that incredible poignant image of the human inside the car. Then I was knelt down by Michael in the garage when Roland had his accident, and we were watching it on those little Olivetti TVs that we had back in the time. And I knew absolutely immediately, that was not a normal accident. And I turned the TV off. I remember Michael almost got cross with me for turning the TV off, but I didn't feel like it was something you should be watching. So then, going to race day and reset and tried to make the best out of it. And then JJ had that huge start line accident. There's a safety car, and then Ayrton had his accident, and initially it looked like a sort of reasonably normal accident, and then we were busy because it was a red flag, go on the grid, get the car ready for the restart. I remember the silence at the circuit. Everyone knew it was something more serious. And then that evening, I was working on the car, and Mick Cowlishaw, who's the chief mechanic at Benetton, he'd been sent as mechanic when he was at Tolman, and he knew the sort of the relationship that I had with Ayrton, and he put his hand on my arm and he said, "Ayrton's gone," and I can feel his hand on my arm now. It's that poignant. And I've talked about it before, actually, but we went to the airport to fly home. Nobody wanted to get on the plane, because also in the pit lane that day, Michele Alboreto, his wheel came off in the pit lane. The wheel nut hit my number one mechanic on the leg, cut his leg, and the wheel hit somebody else in the pit lane. It was just like one thing after another after another. So it was good to put that behind us.
I think those dark days, we've had, obviously, Jules Bianchi after that. They teach us as an F1 community a lot about ourselves and how to power forward and still remember those magnificent people. But somehow you just have to carry on, don't you? There's no thought of walking away.
No, and there's an unsung hero in all of this, which is the FIA. And their reaction in terms of the safety measures that they've been putting in place consistently over the 34 years I've been in the sport, and the extraordinary steps they've made towards safety. And I think it's often under-realised, the work that goes on there.
Absolutely. I know our time is running out. Can I just ask you, in an about turn, what are you most excited about for the future?
The opportunity. We've got an ambitious plan, and the excitement around making that plan a reality, with the challenges that we have in terms of time. I'm more energized than I can ever remember, and I just can't wait for the next steps.
Have you got a time plan of when you expect a first win, when you expect to be challenging for a championship? Do you have that foresight?
Well, first of all, we're sat here now with more points than we achieved last year, so I think that's one of the...
Win, all down to you, obviously.
Which was in fairness before I started, but it's been a challenging last few races. We can't hide from that. We can't hide from the fact that I don't think we understand C45, our car, at this point as well as we'd like to. But that we're on a journey. And we're taking every little win at a time. There's a lot of continuous improvement going on, a lot of people putting a huge amount of effort in, and we're on the journey.
Well, good luck with the journey, and many more years of being in the F1 paddock and making it what it is.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to chat.
5 Live's Checkered Flag Podcast.
Jenny catching up with Sauber team principal Jonathan Wheatley there over the Miami weekend. And Andrew, since Miami, there has actually been some changes at Audi once again within the management team.
Yes, second time within 10 months or so. So Mattia Binotto, who previously was the Chief Operating and Technical Officer, and he replaced Andreas Seidel, who was the previous Chief Executive Officer last year. He's been given a new job title as Head of F1 Project. And the former CEO, Adam Baker, who was kind of in charge of the engine program at Neuburg in Germany, he's left the company. Audi and Sauber say that this doesn't change the responsibilities of Binotto and Jonathan Wheatley, but it makes the structure of the engine and chassis departments holistically clearer and streamlined. So basically what it means is that Binotto is in charge of the design and manufacture of the car and engine in the 2 factories. So the team's based in Hinwil in Switzerland, the engine department, as I said, at Neuburg in Germany. And Wheatley is in charge of the car once it leaves the factory. But, it doesn't look great, does it, from the outside, that a team that isn't even officially racing under its real name yet, Audi don't enter F1 officially until 2026, has already had 2 management structure changes. As you know, Harry, people in Formula One are not expecting Audi to start off very competitively next year. In fact, neither is Binotto, for that matter.
No, there is a lot of pessimism there. Just to remind ourselves and anybody who may be trying to wonder about how this transition is going to go, you mentioned the Hinwil base still remains part of the team. That is Sauber and Neuberg is where Audi is. How is this operation set up? Is Audi absorbing effectively the entirety of what was the Sauber team?
Audi has now 100% bought Sauber. Yes, that happened earlier this year. Now, also what was announced earlier this year after Audi had taken control of the team is that Qatar will buy a minority shareholding in the Audi F1 project, but basically it's wholly owned by Audi.
Right, well, let's see how that transition goes. Of course, we'll have another team on the grid as well, brand new in the form of Cadillac, who were trying to make a bit of a splash over the Miami Grand Prix weekend too. So still lots of question marks surrounding Audi's transition into 2026. That just about does it for this week's Extra Pod. However, I did want to speak about and remember Jochen Mass, the former F1 driver who won the 1975 Spanish Grand Prix for McLaren, who died at the age of 78 on Sunday following complications following a stroke he suffered in February. Andrew, this is obviously very sad, but looking back on Jochen's career, he achieved not only a lot inside the cockpit of a car, but had an impact on a pretty big name in the sport too.
He did, yeah. His Formula One career, he was one of those drivers who was, solid, good, but not world-class level. He was teammate to James Hunt, for example, at McLaren for a while. Won that race in Spain in 1975. That was a slightly chaotic race. And unfortunately for him, though, on a Formula One basis, I think he's probably remembered most strongly for his involvement, unwitting involvement in the death of Gilles Villeneuve. His was the car that Villeneuve hit in qualifying at the 1982 Belgian Grand Prix, which then led the Ferrari that Villeneuve was driving to somersault through the air, bounce down the track, throw Villeneuve out, and he was killed in that accident. It was a misunderstanding. Mass was trying to get out of Villeneuve's way, and he moved to the outside through a kink, and Villeneuve went the same way, unfortunately. I think Mass was quite badly affected by that incident, as you would be. But after he left Formula One, he got involved in sports car racing, and he was part of the Sauber team, which was effectively a Mercedes factory Le Mans and sports car program, and he was a mentor to the three young drivers that they were bringing up through the late 80s, and that was Michael Schumacher, Karl Wendlinger and Heinz-Harald Frentzen, names all of which got to Formula One of them obviously with conspicuously more success than the others. So it was an important role that he played for Mercedes at that in that period.
Well, there is a tribute over on the BBC Sport website for Jochen Mass, the former F1 driver who did sadly die on Sunday at the age of 78. Thank you, Andrew. So a reminder then that you can now hear the Chequered Flag podcast every week. Oh, and we had obviously Gunther Steiner on a couple of weeks ago. Guess what I'm doing tonight, Andrew?
I don't know.
I'm going to go see him in his tour. He's in my local area.
You can't get enough of Gunther Steiner these days, can you?
I know. My brother really wants to go. Anyway, enough of my social plans. Next week, it is the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix from Imola, so you can hear our usual Chequered Flag podcast content from Thursday, the 15th of May. Plus, we'll have live coverage of every session, including the race across the 5 Live network. You'll be in the very capable hands of Ben Edwards and Mark Priestley for that one. All information, such as session times and exactly where you can hear us, will be on the BBC Sport website. Thank you for your company. This has been an IMG production for BBC Sounds.